Hey everybody, it's Uncle John from Your Story Hour, and I've just been asked by Aunt Nikki if I could read her chapter for today. Something's come up, and looks like she'll be taking up tomorrow's chapter for me. So we're trading chapters this today. So we're gonna get to another chapter from Too Much Salt and Pepper by Sam Campbell, and this is chapter number 4, Magic Night with Monkey Shines. Ah, balsam juice. Oh, and just so you know, I haven't practiced reading this, so you're going to get a bunch of mistakes. All right, here we go. There are times in forest life that are made just for unusual adventure. One who lives in the woods quickly recognizes such charmed hours. I doubt if anyone can say just what distinguishes them. Nevertheless, occasionally there is a sacred something in the mood of nature which promises great things. All the living things fall under this spell, and the whole woodland world moves in mysterious waves about one common purpose. While we often feel this mood during daylight hours, it reaches its height only as darkness creeps over the forest world. Magic night is the name we have for such precious periods, and it does seem then that the fairies, gnomes, nymphs, and spirits created by human imagination might come trooping out of secret doors in trees and rocks or come sliding down on starbeams. That spring, a magic night came to the sanctuary. Jenny recognized it and called me to look out of our door into the gathering gloom. Salt and Pepper, for once, were quiet. They stretched out on a limb of a tree, feet hanging down, eyes open, just looking and listening into the night. "There will be adventure in the forest tonight," Jenny affirmed. The sky had blushed beautifully at the last caress of the sun, and now an afterglow held at the horizon as if nature were clinging to her memory of day. Venus, the evening star, was shining like a jewel worn on the breast of the night. The sweet breath of the forest bore the pungent perfume of countless woodland blossoms. A pleasant nocturnal chill crept over the earth, and a mist began to rise like a veil nature was drawing across her face. "The night is calling. Shall we go?" I asked. But Jenny did not wish to go. She had writing to do, she said, and I knew well about that writing. Another of those mysterious letters had arrived and must be answered. My questions always drew the same evasive answers, the same provoking wink and smile, so I had learned it was futile to press the matter. "Then if you do not mind, I shall go alone," I said. "We must not waste a magic night, you know." "Please do," insisted Jenny, "and I'll be waiting to hear about your adventure." I walked through the darkness to the shore where my canoe was always waiting. Salt and Pepper never stirred as I passed beneath them. "Would that I could charm them as this night has done," I thought, recalling their nibbling and gnawing. But I knew this power would never be mine. For a moment, I stood beside the canoe, drinking in the growing glory about me. In the distance, a great horned owl haunted the rich gloom with his hollow voice. Tree toads were calling. There came the last sleepy notes of a robin. Some creature, a deer or bear, was wading along in shallow waters on a distant shore, splashing musically. Back of all else was the rhythmic murmur of hordes of insects. In the dark, these sounds seemed unattached, as if the night itself thus spoke in countless tongues. Now I slipped the canoe into the water, and sculling silently over the smooth surface, approached the mainland. Towering trees loomed like a great cloud over me. Back of me now lay the island, silhouetted against the afterglow, the lighted cabin windows looking like little peepholes in the darkness through which we might see into a realm of even greater glory. And I remember saying quietly to myself, "I wonder if there is anything in creation more beautiful than that. A cabin with lighted windows standing on a pine-covered island silhouetted against the afterglow, seen on a magic night." Some way it seemed to be the meeting point of what is human in nature and what is natural in man, revealing that which is divine. I landed and walked through the darkness along the trail that circles our mainland cabin. No need to use the flashlight I carried in my pocket. I knew every foot of this trail, every bush, every tree. I knew when I was at the hillside where Bobette the fawn had loved to sun herself. Knew when I passed the little animal runway where Rack and Ruin the raccoons came and went. Knew when I was approaching the old red pine stump on which had been placed a cake of salt as an offering to all visiting creatures, but particularly as a gift to Inky the porcupine. But here something caused me to stop and listen. There was a creature at the salt lick. First, I heard the rustling about in the leaves that might have been caused by almost any kind of animal. I listened anxiously. Then came sounds which left no doubt of the identity of the sound maker. Crunch, 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 as chisel-like teeth bit into the wood of the salt-soaked stump. And then I heard the soft, happy grunts of a porcupine. Could this possibly be my old friend Inky? My heart pounded with delight. Suppressing excitement as best I could, I gave the porcupine call, the one for companionship or attention. The crunching stopped. So did the happy grunts. Inky, I ventured his name, and then followed with a message in porcupinese. There was no reply immediately. However, neither was there a hurried flight by the animal, and this encouraged me. Taking one cautious step at a time, I moved toward the salt lick. It was now about 30 feet away. All the while I was talking my most cultured porcupinese, interspersed with a few enticing human words. Within about 10 feet of the stump, I paused. Still, there was no sound from the creature. I turned on my flashlight. There sat an enormous old porky looking calmly and inquisitively in my direction. I was convinced. Inky, Inky, you blessed old scamp, is that you? He did not move. This assured me more than anything else that it was he. A wilder creature would be gone before this. I approached him cautiously, talking constantly in soft tones. Finally, after I had emitted a long series of porky words intended to be happy grunts, he made several little sounds in reply. Fully confident now that this was my pet, I knelt near him. Not more than 3 feet separated us. He did not move. I reached out a hand, and he sniffed at it. I touched his nose, and then cautiously smoothed down the coarse quills that crowned his head. For just a moment, this extreme intimacy frightened him. Long life in the forest had nearly erased from his memory this manner of greeting. He started up as if to run away, but he stopped and turned toward me again. Honk, 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 honk. His calls became more strong and confident. He was remembering me. For 4 years now, this little creature had lived a normal porcupine life in the forest. 4 years of problems which daily directed him to develop and depend upon his instincts. Yet the love he had established in his heart for human friends lived on. And there we sat that magic night. A porcupine and a man, our world for the moment a tiny bubble of light the flashlight made in an infinitude of darkness, but each one happy in his own way, and he had found the other. Inky, you bedraggled, quill-covered, ornery-looking old rascal, I said, accustomed to abusing those I love. I never saw anything in my life that looked worse and yet looked better to me than you do. In times past, I always had given Inky the power of human speech in my imagination. He had carried on many a fancied conversation with me. That magic night he gained voice once more, in the same way. "Well, Sammy, old kid," he replied with a twitch of his nose, "you wouldn't take any prizes in a porcupine beauty contest yourself, you white-skinned, thin-haired, dull-toothed, earth-bound scamp. It's right good to see you. Bend over here while I set a quill in your ear, just for old time's sake." "You would, you bum," I said, taking care that he did not get hold of me. "Stand still while I look you over. What a whopper you are." Inky was an enormous porcupine. I looked at him in amazement. He would weigh well over 20 pounds, and his great coat of quills made him look much heavier than that. His quills were very coarse, some of them 4 inches long, and light in color so that he represented a gray appearance. His babyhood blackness had earned him the name of Inky, had entirely vanished. Now, he became a bit bolder, apparently recalling more and more of our friendship. I had dropped to sitting position on the ground. He moved to me, step at a time, until his front feet were in my lap and he was looking up into my face, freely talking his happy grunts. I grunted right back at him. How I wished I could really learn from him his adventures during those long months in the forest. What fine sights he must have seen from his perch high in a tree. "Seems to me," he said, "seems to me you talk better porky than you used to. Lost some of that human." "I'm having lots of practice these days, Inky," I said, stroking his head. "Have you heard about salt and pepper?" "I've heard about them." He shook his quills in obvious disgust. "A couple of young punks, if you ask me. Is that the best you could get?" I laughed. "Inky, I do believe you are jealous." "What? Jealous of those young twig eaters?" He chattered his teeth. "Bet I can girdle a maple tree faster than they can bite off a lily pad." It took a look at the great amber-colored teeth at the front of Inky's mouth would suggest it be true. "But they skinned a 40-foot red pine for me," I taunted. "Aw, boss some juice. It took 2 of 'em to do it, didn't it? Some day come back and see the white pine I skinned all by myself. One of your big ones, out near Vanishing Lake. I tell you, it would take a dozen of those little monkeys to make one good porcupine." And of a sudden, he flew into a spasm of his old-time toughness, whirling and whirling, first one way and then the other, lashing back and forth with his tail and chattering his teeth. I laughed at his antics. How well I remembered how he used to execute this dervish cabin floor, sending us up on chairs or anywhere to get out of his way. I told him that I had to admit he was quite a porcupine. But right when Inky's dance was at its height, there came the sound of breaking twigs back in the forest. Inky heard it and stopped to listen. There were more sounds. Some heavy creature was coming. Inky made a dash for a tree and climbed to safety. "So long, old top," I whispered. "I'll meet you here again." "That's at 8," said Inky, and so it proved to be on many occasions that summer. Now I moved back to a bit of brush, shut off the flashlight, and waited. Closer and closer came the sound of the trail of the newcomer, moving unhurriedly but steadily. I heard the leaves stir on the ground, heard twigs crack, heard bushes rustle as something forced a way through them. At last the sounds were right at the salt lick. I turned on the flashlight. There stood a magnificent doe. The light did not frighten her in the least. She was pawing at the stump a little and licking the wood below the cake of salt. Occasionally she lifted her beautiful head and looked alertly into the night. Her great cupped ears turned constantly, pointing ahead to the back of her as she kept the whole of forest under her attention. An idea came to me, though perhaps I was expecting too much of this magic night. Could this be Babette? If Inky had held his liking for our sanctuary and had made the Salt Lick a calling place, would it be impossible that our fawn should do the same? "Babette!" My voice trembled a little. "Babette!" The doe's ears came forward, and she was all attention. Yet despite my anxiety, I could not accept that this was proof. Any deer would have reacted in the same way to any sound. "Babette, is that you?" I asked the question with all my heart, and yet I knew that I would never have an answer. Mark or manner about this lovely creature that would prove that it was our former friend. We had no language in common. The deer is the most silent of all forest creatures, having no sound other than the whistling snort which is given in alarm. I could not grunt out a conversation as with Inky. The most satisfaction I would know is that it could be Babette there before me. This was a big doe. Babette would be of good size now, for she would be 4 years old. This creature had come from the direction of the valley in which Babette had made her wild home. She had come to the cabin where Babette had been cared for as a fawn. It could be, and I felt happiness even in the possibility. Finished her refreshment at the salt lick. Unhurriedly, she moved into the dark forest from which she had come. I could follow her far into the darkness by the sound of the breaking twigs, rustling leaves, and brush. Perhaps there was a tiny spotted baby of hers back in there somewhere, curled up on the ground, implicitly obeying orders to remain absolutely silent until the mother's return. Jenny listened to the detailed account of the adventure as we sat before a dancing grate fire. She was delighted to hear of Inky's presence. "And couldn't we just call this doe Babette?" she asked. "You know it could be." "Babette is a good name for any deer," I commented, and from that night on, any deer seen at that salt lick was Babette as far as we were concerned. "And now," said I, with a meaning look, "you have written another letter. Am I to learn anything about that mystery?" There came that smile and sly wink. "Not even a magic night can get you that," said Jenny. "That's what I thought," I said resignedly. And that is the end of chapter 4. Come back tomorrow and we'll have another chapter for you from Too Much Salt and Pepper by Sam Campbell. Bye-bye. God bless.